Gormlaith took 3 leaps, which a woman shall never take again. A leap at Clia, a leap at Tower, a leap at Cashel of the Goblets over all. Gormlaith, was she the ultimate High Queen of Ireland? Gormlaith, you see, was not just a queen, but a symbol of sovereignty in Ireland. Married to not only one High King, but 2. And one significant Viking King of Dublin, probably the last real Norse Viking of Dublin, Olaf Curran. She married Olaf Curran at a very young age and had Citric Silkenbeard, being from the Kingdom of Leinster herself, coming from a royal family, her father being King of Leinster and her brother becoming King of Leinster later on, Mael Morda. Gormlaith was involved in the courts of politics in Ireland from a very early age. She would have developed an acumen for political manoeuvring of Ireland at the time. You see, people might think, oh, we were all clans and we were fighting and we did this and there's nothing else to us. There was a system of high kingship. There were kingdoms with provincial kings and petty kings. And you had to maneuver and you had to stay on top of things. Like a Game of Thrones scenario, you had to move, you had to dodge, you had to weave. And you know, obviously, being a woman of the time, she wasn't involved in battles, but she was involved in the battles of the political sphere. There's no doubt about that. I have said this name to many people, even a history teacher, and they don't know who this person is. This person was married to the last Viking king of Dublin, went on to marry either Brian Boru or Mael Shacknail next, probably Mael Shacknail, who was the High King of Ireland in around the 980s AD. He was a guy that came from Meath and he was the High King before Brian Boru. She married Mael Shacknail. It is unknown that she had kids with him, but she was certainly married to Brian Boru at a later time and did have one child with him, Donncha, who would take over for Brian Boru as King of Munster after the Battle of Clontarf. Gormlaith's reign was characterised by her strategic alliances, political acumen, and a deep understanding of the cultural and mythological significance of her role. You see, everything in ancient Ireland was culturally, mythologically, historically significant. The king was the sacred high king, right? But the queen had a huge part in this as well. You see, what the king was doing, which was a sacred thing, and probably where the popes of Rome got their ideas from. The sacred high king was marrying itself to the land, right? And that's, you know, a good high kingship would bring forth prosperity to the land. This was the whole idea of Tara and the king getting inaugurated at Tara. It was a sovereignty goddess. So the wife of the king would play that role as such, because remember, the king was playing a role as well. And this was a union that was looked up to in that society. Gormlaith married 2 high kings and one last Viking king of Dublin. This was huge. So she had a long life in the political game. A lot of the modern interpretations of Gormlaith is that she was evil and she was, you know, involved in the machinations of bringing the Battle of Clontarf. I think that's a lot of nonsense, to be perfectly honest. I think there is an element of it potentially. There is certainly an element of her being involved in the court of Citric Silkenbeard, potentially Mael Morda being her brother, getting involved in that when Mael Morda was insulted by Brian Boru's son or kin. All of this stuff is a bit petty to think that this was the real reason for the Battle of Clontarf to have happened. The reality was the queens of Ireland were looked up to as well. To use a very bad example, let's just say people's infatuation with the royal family today. You know, you have to look at it like that, like in a much purer way, of course, back then, because there was no gossip magazines and TV and such back then. So Gormlaith would have been playing her role in that society. She would have had a very strategic mindset. You would have to be strategically minded if you were able to marry 2 high kings and also marry the last Viking king of Dublin. The Battle of Clontarf, a part of the deal for Sigurd of Orkney, she was still offered as a wife. Even in her later age, she had this fame. These new Viking kings were dreaming of coming to Ireland, taking a kingship and having her as a wife. Remember as well, this woman brought into the world as well 2 unbelievably important figures in Irish history through Olaf Curran and Brian Boru. One was Citric Silkenbeard, who was called the Great Survivor, who survived all the battles, and he was the one that laid the foundations for Christ Church. He really is a huge benefactor and leader and foundation setter of Dublin City. And then Donncha, with her relationship with Brian Boru, Donncha would have taken over from Brian Boru, and he lost the High Kingship because they won the battle, but Brian Boru died. Mael Shacknail took back the High Kingship, but Donncha would later become High King of Ireland later on, and he survived to a very late age, dying in Italy in the end. So it goes without saying, Gormlaith was hugely significant, a massive part of Irish history, and somebody that everybody should know about, especially Irish history teachers, for God's sake. Anyway, the ultimate High Queen of Ireland, Gormlaith. Would you believe me? Oh yes,